All right, welcome back to my channel. I'm your host, Steven. Today's episode is about taking apart the lower joint of your clarinet and some of the issues that tech and players have. Don't forget to give a thumbs up, subscribe, like, and share afterwards. So let's start learning about taking apart the lower joint of your clarinet. One of the first things I want to show is using a cheap screwdriver. This screwdriver is a Pro Series or something, and it has a really thin shaft, not hardened or anything. We'll see the issues we have with the screwdriver. I already actually loosened that one. We put in the slot now, and just trying to get it going. What's happening is the screwdriver is twisting. You can see the shaft is actually bending, and it's a weird feeling because this shaft is bending and twisting, and actually it's bent now. I don't know if you can see it's actually bent, and that's why you want to get a good screwdriver that has a thick shaft where the cutout head is actually smaller than the shaft. That really helps, and this is hardened. So when I put it in there into the slot, it just works itself right out. Take that and put it right over here. Now, a couple of things. You want to pay attention to what type of lifters you have here. These are actually pin lifters. So there's a hole in this arm here that a pin from the spatula key goes into. There's other more basic lifters that just basically lift up a step. As an example, this is a clarinet with lifters, step lifters. You can see these can actually be separate from the key motion. See how that works? Dimension can be separate from the key motion. So as you're playing, these things can like dangle around. Whereas these with the pins, since they have pins in them, these keys go with the key motion. So it's synchronized movement. Now we have those keys off, the C sharp and B key. Now we take a look at what's the next easiest key to take off. Certainly not this one, the C key. And it's actually the ring keys at this point. Now this is where we need a long screwdriver. Because with a short screwdriver, we're trying to get to these two screws here. Your hand gets in the way here. Even the good one here, we get in the way there. With a long screwdriver, we actually get to that. You have to push down these keys here to get to the screws. But first, there's a spring we want to take care of. And we'll be using a spring tool. Here's a couple examples of some. Spring tool here, you see has a hook on this side. And a cutout section here, which will get to the spring and push it. This one will hook. This is actually the first tool I've ever owned. It was given to me by Herbert Koff, actually, when I started getting into trying to figure out why my saxophone doesn't play 100%. There's other variations. There's homemade ones. This is made by someone that was made with a crochet hook. They made a hook over here by bending it, thinning it out, bending it, and basically cut out a slot here. So that works good too. There's another real old one. Got a hook here. This is a solid shaft, and they cut out a 90 degree hook down here. And on either end, they cut out a little V section with a file on both sides. This one has a long slot. Works pretty good. This here has really small V sections on it. This one works good. This is actually from watch repair. Funny thing, huh? You can actually cross-use tools. But taking a good look at this. What we have is we have a spring coming from the post up to this spring cradle. So we want to get this close to the spring cradle, and if it's dirty, it may be a little bit hard to push, but a quick push and we get it bent right out. You can see it bends all the way up here. We'll notice other springs over here. We don't want to get to that yet because we don't want to actually accidentally poke ourselves. Using a long screwdriver. It's quite easy to get out. And we go put it on a board over here. Flip it around. I can use my short screwdriver now. If you want, what I usually do sometimes too is I inspect the pivot point. Take a look at how much gunk is on it, whether it's a smooth pivot point or not. Gives you an idea of how the clarinet was used. And this key comes right off. Now we also want to inspect as we have this key off. We're going to take a look at this opening right here. Is it round? Is it ovalized? Is it off center? This one we can see has some wear going off to the side here. This is not perfectly round. The bottom one is a little bit more enlarged because the key is usually, of course, weight going down. So this one has seen some good use. Now normally if these were really bad, what you could do is do some silver solder inside of this, and then you ream it out a little bit so it fits the pivot screw a little bit better. But these keys are actually fairly tight as they were, so we're not going to do anything. This clarinet is basically closet kept right now. Now that out of the way, the next easiest key to take off. We can take off the side key anytime. But let's look at this over here. We have a stack of 3 layers here. We have the lowest key right here, which mechanism is down here, and also with the crow's foot, this piece right here, which is independent of either of the 2 keys. Is this top key right here. So we got 3, this lower rod, middle rod, and we use this top rod. This top rod has 2 keys on it. Now this is different than a LeBlanc. A LeBlanc E-flat key is actually separate. Has its own separate posts. And the C key, the one with the crow's foot, is separated from this post right here. Now both of them have springs on them. Now it's a little bit difficult from a distance of unhooking them, but I'll try from here. Let's take a look at it from this perspective. So first we'll identify where the spring comes off of a post. And we can see the spring cradle over here. And this key is separate. In the key itself, there's actually a slot, usually. This one has a cradle on it though. Sometimes there'll be a slot on the arm. This one does have a cradle. And these are probably the two hardest springs you have to deal with. So as we inspect this, we'll see that the springs are pushed against from this way going in. And as you see here, there's no room to push anything out. So this is where we use the opposite hook. Get in there slightly. And what we're doing is you're pulling it out and then lowering it down. So we basically pull it out, then lower it down, then let it go. That's what we're doing there. Also over here. I want to hold the key so it doesn't move with my motion. There we go. Now I can use the screwdriver. Get it in the slot there. And this is one long screw rod that supports both the keys going through the middle posts. And there it is. And we can see the springs in there. Next, as we see the C key, we have two arms over it. Now everything becomes fairly simple. Watch out for the open springs. Don't stick your thumb into it. So first I'm going to knock this off. Slowly releasing the tension. And then once again, taking the screws off. Took a little bit of work, a little bit of screws kind of stuck. And on cheap screwdrivers, what would happen is this thing would just bend and twist. Would never get it off. And there's our screw. Now in some clarinets, like B&H clarinets or Eaton clarinets, you'll have long rods and not screws in these things. These are pretty well stuck. Slowly adding more tension. There we go. The C sharp key is interesting because they cut a slot in the wood for the lower spring. Then they give us this cradle. In this case, I believe this cradle is actually a cylinder with a hole in it, and the spring goes in the cylinder. I'm not sure we can get up close enough to show that. We're looking right over here. That's the cradle. Appears to be a cylinder. We'll roll over. And the spring goes into it. So there's nothing to unhook. But we gotta remember when we put the key on, it slides on to the spring. One reason why I picked a Buffet. Buffet has some of the more complex issues. Now, of course, getting to the screw, we see that the post is in the way. And just going sideways is good enough usually. I'm going to take off the F sharp key real quickly. It does have a spring on it. It requires something really thin to get down there. Sometimes it's easier to go the opposite route. In this case, we can't. Ouch. Getting it lowered. There we go. It's off. Got the spring down. So you get a little twang. This one's coming out easily. This is a rod screw, not a pointed screw. Now you can use, I use smooth tooth pliers to take these off, and also some crimping pliers work really good too. Keywork comes right off. So this one's been played quite a bit. Next, we have to be careful about the chimneys. You do not want to crack the chimneys. That's the reason you want to have a long screwdriver. If you had a shorter screwdriver, you could hit the chimneys here. If you had something shorter and had to work even shorter. Right here, if we look at this using a cheap screwdriver, we have a couple issues. One, interference with the chimneys, and two, my finger's going to be right next to the needle spring right here, and that probably would hurt. This is a large head screw. You can also use tweezers to get these things out. I do too. I use these tweezers here to get some screws out sometimes. Sometimes it's just easier. When you're young, you have flexible fingers. It's an easy thing to do. As you get older, it's like you need more help. So now this is the one. I left the, if you remember, I left the one screw in here because it was tight, and it's a good example because this has the, of course, barrel spring cradle on this. There's not very many options we have here. We have to lift this up above this arm, and then we have to come this way to pull it off a little bit. And we come down here. You can probably see that spring now. Oh, there's one of the reverse springs. You got it backwards. Okay. So this spring is in this cradle. It's fixed. It doesn't go slide into it. I've seen somebody that slides into it, and the spring comes off of that, and it gets affixed. In here, there's a little slot in here, even a smaller slot. You got the big slot for the cradle, another slot for where the spring moves back and forth, and a little itty bitty slot up here where the tip of the spring goes into, and it's underneath this fixing plate here, which holds the post and the spring. But this is Buffet S1, by the way. You can see the cutouts that buffets are known for, professional, because the keyworks are really low. And we have one last key to deal with. It also has a long spring on it, but truthfully I don't worry about this one. I just kind of take things off. And you'll learn that you don't actually have to take off this lower pivot screw. This is an easy one to deal with. Watch out for the springs. You don't want to put your fingers into tone holes either. You don't want to potentially damage them. Kind of holding the body, cradling the body from this side all the way to this side. And trying to see where the slot is from 3 feet away. But the camera's in my way. There somewhere. In this case, I'll put some of my anti-seize oil on this thing. So there we go. We got all the keywork off this lower jointed clarinet. Next, we're going to do an example of, well, not only putting the keywork back on, but of using the Magnet machine we have right over here and how that comes into play in helping us look at the clarinet itself. So I want to thank you for listening today. Any questions or comments, please post them down below. Don't forget to give a thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. You gotta love knowledge, gotta love life, and you gotta love clarinets. We'll see you next time.